good evening and welcome to the Super License F1 podcast. I'm your best comrade, Rodney.
I am your true leader, Zach.
True leader, and everyone's true leader. All hail the leader. Zach, have you had an excellent Russian Grand Prix weekend?
I have just had the best Russian Grand Prix. I like that everything starts on time with the Russian Grand Prix. It just all runs very smoothly, very cleanly. There's nothing surprising. Doesn't seem like there's anybody there either, which is always the depressing thing about the Sochi Grand Prix. They just drive around in this seemingly like post-apocalyptic like cement world. I find it so odd. I can't remember seeing any crowd other than close-ups of people, which could have been pre-cut.
It is concerning when there's more flags than people at the Grand Prix.
Yeah. I don't get it. Where are they all? Surely they could be bussing them in or something.
They're probably all at home watching it on TV though, right?
Yeah, it's a better experience at home. You get all the data, the sweet, sweet data.
Well, Zach, for the rest of us, this weekend meant that it was time for the Russian Grand Prix. And did you know that Melbourne and Sochi are the only two tracks that are built around discarded Olympic infrastructure? It's true. And the Herman Tilke design track in Sochi features 16 turns that twist and wind around the Sochi Olympic Village, which it turns out was also Tilke designed. And it's just a 30-minute drive from the Sochi CBD, which, you guessed it, is also Herman Tilke designed. Literally the entire city. Or if you're just flying in for the race, your Herman Tilke designed plane can touch down, and you're just a 15-minute Herman Tilke designed taxi drive away from the side of the track. And if you're lucky, you might get a lift from that wily lover of the Russian Queen, Herman Tilke himself, who can drop you off trackside, leaving you plenty of time to find your seat in the Herman Tilke grandstand and enjoy a few beers while you munch down on a couple of Tilke burgers. That's nice. We might as well pencil in a Mercedes victory for all future Russian Grand Prix, Zach, because this race is a silver wash, and I suppose we have to race regardless, so we might as well just race to Russia, baby.
Oof, it does kind of feel that way with Herman Tilke. He's got his hands all over this sport and all over this city. I could believe, I don't know how much of the Tilke truth is in there. I don't know if you're a Tilke truther, but it wouldn't surprise me if the whole Olympic Village was Tilke designed. It does kind of have that air about it. Lots of space between everything. Lots of runoff zones for everyone,
yeah, lots of
everywhere.
Runoffs. Yeah, if you're walking down a little alleyway and you're texting, no worries about bumping into anything, plenty of space. I like it. It's nice and roomy.
Yeah.
And not a lot of overtaking, but who's in a rush anyway?
No, why would you be in a rush in Russia? Actually, can we not make that joke maybe?
I was going to try not to. I tried really hard not to. I read a whole race. I mean, I mentioned Herman Tilke 15 times just to avoid making the Russian joke anyway. Well, there was a Russian Grand Prix race, Zach. I suppose we'd better recap it as we do. That's kind of what the show's about. Let's get into it.
Let us race a bit. I gave him space. Suck my balls, mate. Let's hurry up and get out of here. We've got a race to do.
My voice is just it's like a roller coaster, my voice this week. Zach, the Russian Grand Prix, it was a great time for viewing if you happen to be in my part of the world, as we talked about before the race. Nice, easy 9 p.m. start, 11 p.m. finish. I was in bed before midnight. It was a bloody pleasant experience, I got to tell you.
That was so early. We could have done an immediate post-race show, which I don't think we've done for quite a long time.
Oh, boy.
But maybe we should have just got straight into it.
Many a year. Might have been the Japanese Grand Prix a few years ago. We tried that. Again, another nice afternoon race for me, but usually it's because you're jet setting off to some place, so we just have to squeeze it in. And maybe one day we'll try it. Oh, actually, maybe when you're here, we might try. Let's sizzle that a little bit. A bit of a forward promotion. But in the meantime, Zach, it's our job, it's our duty, it's our God-given right that we get to recap the Russian Grand Prix. And as always, we start off the recap with a 30-second tight summary, a summation, if you will, of the race. It's my turn in the rotation, unfortunately, so I'm going to hit play on my own sound effect, act surprised when it starts, and then, make a valiant effort to sum up this race in just 30 seconds. Here we go. Essentially, the whole race can be summed up by Leclerc on pole, giving his teammate Sebastian Vettel a tow down the start, and Vettel taking the lead. And then what happened? Well, Vettel disobeyed team orders. What's new?
20 seconds.
And then he got his hubris. He ended up on the side of the road, which sparked a safety car, which, boom, screwed his teammate. So sucked into you, Ferrari. Nice 1-2 victory for Mercedes.
Seconds.
Really uneventful, frankly, as expected. Down the grid, well, at the start, we had three cars crashing. Later, we had Magnussen getting a rubbish penalty that he was not happy about. And guess that's about it.
It sounds like a template for most of modern Formula One. right now. Ferrari doing okay, strategy doing them over, Mercedes being totally solid, and Magnussen having a poor finish to the race.
Yeah, I mean, it's a trap that you fall into, saying the Ferrari strategy was poor. Their strategy was solid, and they were running in such a strong position. It's not really right, I don't think, to say strategy. It's something else. It's the rub of the green. It's the way racing goes. Sometimes, it's like that saying, like, sometimes you're the statue and sometimes you're the pigeon. This week, they were the statue, and they got shat on. They were also the pigeon shitting on themselves. That just happens sometimes.
It does feel like they were maybe out. Yeah, you're right. The strategy wasn't poor from Ferrari, but I think that the Mercedes strategy was strong, which is they started on the slightly harder tyre. They knew they could run a little longer, and there was going to be a safety car at some point. That was what they bet on. That's what everybody bet on last race as well. And it didn't quite work for everybody last week, but this week it really did for Mercedes. And they you could say that they got lucky, but they had a plan, and they knew that they probably weren't going to be fast enough to overtake the Ferraris if one of them couldn't do it off the start, which is what Ferrari planned for, right? They've said Binotto, right? That's the team principal at Ferrari. Binotto, not Binotti, Binotto.
You got
said
it.
Post-race,
You got it.
I got it, Binotto. That was always going to be the plan, that Leclerc, he knew Leclerc was going to be giving a slipstream to someone, so you might as well give it to your team instead of to your rival.
That makes sense.
So he gave it to Vettel, and Vettel just cruised past him before the second corner. I was like, thank you so much for that delicious hole in the air that you left me. So easy. With the idea that Leclerc would be able to swap that position back later in the race. Later in the race is exactly the kind of small details you need to lock down in any contract with Sebastian Vettel, is to define when that is going to be, because it might as well have been like lap 2. That was probably when it was best at happening. They'd managed to get away, the Ferraris over the Mercedes, so why not just change it as soon as you can? But Vettel was like, you know what, fuck that shit. Put the hammer down, hammer time for Vettel, and just flew off to, like, at one point he was like about 2 seconds in front. He was more than outside the DRS zone, I think, by the time they flicked the DRS switch, which I hope is a really big, like, green button that the race steward has to just, like, press a massive button or flick a massive switch. DRS is on, and Vettel's down the road, and Leclerc immediately starts putting together his very cogent and well understood arguments about why he needs to be in the lead. And look, Sebastian Vettel, I gave him that special toe. I did everything that was asked of me, and why is it that I'm not winning again? Do you think that this was Vettel just blatantly ignoring team orders, or did he do the right thing for the team and the race at the time, which was to kind of press the advantage that he had?
I think he was blatantly doing the wrong thing in terms of team orders. I mean, that's not to say that necessarily his defense had no merit. Him saying, well, you know, I mean, I could slow down by 2 seconds, but hey, that's going to affect my race pretty tremendously. And instead of being clear in the front in leading the race and we can pull away, Hamilton will be right on my ass cheeks, and I don't really want that. So, not to say that that was wrong, but it's quite clear that the team had an arrangement that rather than give the advantage to Hamilton off the line, they were going to give it to him, but only on the condition that he swapped positions back. And he clearly didn't want to do that. And I mean, it was clear from the immediate radio messages that Vettel knew exactly what was up, and he was like, I can't switch back right now because of something else. So it's not, there was no confusion, even though after the race he was doing interviews going, yeah, I don't know, there was some agreement, someone was saying something, maybe I misunderstood or something, but no, I don't think I had to give it back, no. And then later Binotto was like, yeah, no, we definitely had an agreement, he definitely knew what was up, and he did not do it, naughty boy. So look, yeah, I mean, Sebastian disagreeing with disobeying team orders is nothing new. I think the thing is, though, that I mean, that's a Ferrari problem. Like, that's a Sebastian Vettel Ferrari problem. It's not. It's got nothing to do with Mercedes. Nothing to do with, you know, anything else. They'll have to deal with it, and they probably will. I think the big issue is what's Leclerc going to do next time when the team comes up with some crazy plan and they're like, look, you just give Vettel a bit of an advantage now, but we promise he'll give it back to you later. He'll be like, yeah. Singapore, yeah, how did that work out? Yeah, Russia, how did that go? Not so great. So I think they're Well, I mean, I'm not saying they're shooting themselves in the foot. Vettel is holding the gun and he's shooting other people directly in the feet.
Yeah, it's a weird situation because they did then later go and they still played to Leclerc's strength by it. They said, okay, Leclerc, you can come in first and pull the undercut on Vettel, which worked, which I suppose in that circumstance that does keep your drivers 1-2 in that circumstance, because if they hadn't done that, maybe if they pitted Leclerc later, he probably would have got the advantage of the safety car that came up pretty soon afterwards, which is Vettel's fault. Well, not Vettel's fault, but Vettel's car. I don't know how that might have played out, but it did seem like the right move at the right time in a very elegant way to give that position back, which was go, okay, you're the one who had a great race weekend. You've gotten pole. You've did what we asked you off the start. Now come in for your nice, easy pit stop. And that way we'll make sure that, Vettel pushed really, really, really hard. Like it was quite close. Vettel did Leclerc absolutely no favors at all. It was like, no, I'm going to try my best to stay out in front of you here, actually, which didn't quite work out. And then, I found that quite interesting that if they're going to keep trying to play this game, I don't think Ferrari's so far in front of Mercedes really at all to be able to basically try to run these races like they're their own races, that they're always going to win and they're just having to decide between whether it's Vettel or Leclerc who's going to win. They're not that unassailable. We saw that this weekend, that through all their toing and froings, they had some bad luck, and lo and behold, Leclerc doesn't finish first or second. He ends up in a third, which is where you would expect, the opposite of whoever's got the luck to finish, because the rest of the field is so far behind these days. But they were left kind of short, and I think that more Ferrari focus on themselves, the less well they do. And I think they need to put this Leclerc-Vettel thing to bed really soon. I don't have a solution on how they'll do that because, if, in order for them, I think, to compete with Mercedes, they need to have a genuine, number one driver. And I think that driver should be the informed driver, which I think is Charles Leclerc right now, based on pole and race ability. What do you think? Do you think this will just continue to kind of fizzle along for the rest of the year? Because if they go with this driver lineup for next year as well, I don't see how it will be solved.
Yeah, it's going to be a problem, and I think I'm not sure if it necessarily coincides with this sort of amazing package that Ferrari have delivered, where they're all of a sudden really, showing up Mercedes at tracks where they thought that they might struggle, and you've got Lewis Hamilton saying things like, "It's a very real prospect that I may not, win a race and win another race this year." That's a thing that could happen. But I mean, I think it was really telling to hear Toto Wolff after this race say things like, sometimes in F1, you show up, you might not have the fastest package, but you can still win. And, I think the prospect for Ferrari are, they might have just, purposefully or accidentally stumbled on some amazing package that all of a sudden their car has just unpacked all of its potential. They might be in a race winning position for the rest of the year. And if they play their cards right, they might win a whole bunch of them. The thing is, I said last week, what is Vettel going to do to win the team back? What's he going to do to have the team build around him again? And I said that probably the easiest and best way for him to do that was to play the team game and fully support Leclerc. And he had the perfect opportunity this week to do it. And he showed his intention was pretty clear. I have no interest in doing that. Absolutely none. I'm Sebastian fucking Vettel, and you'll do what I say. So, it's going to be fireworks. It's going to be sparks. It's going to be, wheel to wheel the rest of the season, which, that's exciing in a way, especially if they're at the front. Really is. If the stakes are wins rather than podium positions, this can only spell good things. And we've had a lot of good races. Let's just hope that turns into a lot more exciting racing in the final, 5 or 6 races.
Yeah, I suppose the only disappointment for me this weekend was that Charles seemed to have the ability to catch up to Bottas, but not really close that gap in the closing stages of the race, where I thought
it's not easy to overtake you.
Some good, you're exactly right. It's difficult, especially when later in the race, the Mercedes they kind of found their form a little bit. They'd managed to keep enough in reserve that they could just push hard enough, and every single time Leclerc got close, Bottas would fight his way through that final sector when the Mercedes was very strong. I think you're right. It's a different idea trying to overtake a Mercedes than it is to keep them behind you. I think they're much easier to keep behind than they are to overtake.
Interesting point that's come up post-race is, what are we going to do about pitting under the safety car. And it's a question that, the big minds have been weighing in. And by big minds, I mean BBC journalists. But, we could throw around some ideas. What do you think? Should it be allowed? Should it be not allowed? Or should it be tweaked so that drivers who have already pitted aren't too disadvantaged?
I mean, it's difficult. I mean, Paul DeResta was talking about it during the commentary as well.
Yeah.
I don't think David Croft was particularly equipped to answer it. In fact, I find
that's a very good way to describe David Croft's entire style.
Yeah, I think his style is he brings a lot of life, and he knows all the drivers' names, and he knows all the tracks, and he knows all the people, and he's a very steady hand. Like, his hand is on the tiller. You don't need to, he will just keep that ship totally even keeled. And he's got, you're right, he's a bit of a hype man. Whereas both Anthony Davidson, and Paul DeResta bring so much in knowledge and understanding and insight into strategy and where drivers are picking up the throttle off corners and why that's good. And I learned so much just by listening to those two. And I'm like, I wish there was an alternative commentary where I could just listen to both of you do the whole race, or I could watch the race again with you two commentating, because you'd see it through a different lens. But I quite liked this point around, it's not that it's a massive advantage purely because, if it's such a time saver to go through the pits and get a relatively cheap pit stop under a virtual safety car. It's just that depending on what's come before it, it can massively change the whole race situation, because Formula One's full of these kinds of little things that just, if something doesn't go your way, it can disproportionately affect your race. And that's the problem with this, is that it can have such a big impact. I don't think that we need to fundamentally change the way that pit stops work overall, or the way that safety cars work overall. I actually quite like the virtual safety car. I think it's less disruptive for the whole race. It means that small things can be fixed quite quickly. But it's what Paul DeResta said, which is that it's meant to be a neutralizing factor on the race. It essentially holds the race still in time while something on the track is removed or some other thing is fixed. So letting people pit fundamentally goes against that idea of neutralizing the race. Just close the pit lane then. If virtual safety cars only go for 1 or 2 laps, that's not going to be a huge problem. And if you were just about to pit, let's say, cruising around under virtual safety car for a little bit of time is not going to have a massive impact on your race at all, because the gap that you were going to pit and come out into is still going to be there. You're not racing really fast, so your tires are not going to be disproportionately affecting your ability to race, anything like that. So just close the pit lane and then reopen the pit lane as soon as the virtual safety car is over. Seems like a simple fix to me. What do you think?
I think there's 2 ways to go, and we need to determine what we actually want as an outcome. The first thing I would say is that, unbelievably, I agree with something Jolyon Palmer said after the race.
Ooh,
I know, it's incredible.
J-bombs.
Unbelievable. I never thought I would utter those words. But he said something along the lines of, if someone's going to pit under either a virtual safety car or a full safety car, they should have to treat it as if they've been given a time penalty where they pull in, the engineers can't touch the car for 5 seconds or 10 seconds, then they start their pit stop, and then they can go, and that would nullify this effect of coming in under the safety car and getting a half price pit stop, and all of a sudden you go from third to winning. I don't know. That seemed to me like the most sensible approach if the goal is to stop people from jumping wildly up or down the grid based on the fact that they pitted under a safety car. The other thing I was going to say though is the fact that it scrambles the grid a little bit is one of those rare times that we get, and we might get it a couple of times a season. And I think it just introduces a little bit of unpredictability. The way that, when it rains, people get so excited. They're like, the rain, everything's going to be scrambled, and, who knows who's going to win. It's going to be great. And I'm not saying it's as exciting watching cars go around behind a safety car while someone pits and gets a cheap pit stop. That's not as exciting as watching the cars kind of getting all wobbly in the rain. I'm not saying that for a second, but the outcome is that it's something that's outside of the driver's hands, but it might mean the difference between winning or not even getting on the podium, right? And so the question would be, do we want to lose that unpredictable factor? Do we want to do we want to iron it out and smooth it out and make sure everything is a lot more sanitized and even, or is it perhaps a little bit better that we every now and again get this kind of result where someone who maybe by other rights would not have won gets a win? I mean, it's unfortunate that it's Lewis Hamilton and not, Carlos Sainz or someone else, where it's like, look, this is why we need to keep this and it's so great. But I just wonder if we want to get rid of all those little unpredictable factors or keep them as an actual positive of the sport. I don't know. Depends what you want to achieve.
Yeah. I think that what do we want to achieve? Those goalposts move all the time. I think a lot of these unpredictable factors, and look, we talked about this last week when we were talking about how could we change qualifying or could we reverse the grid?
That's valid. Yeah.
This kind of incident with a virtual safety car just after the leaders had pitted, I suppose. It was so fundamentally like, if that hadn't happened, this person would have likely have won. Like it was like a straight swap. Like this one piece of bad luck affected Charles Leclerc and Sebastian Vettel's race, and now the only other two people who could have won came 1 and 2, and this is purely because Formula One is so badly classed or weighted right now that there are 4 cars that can basically win a race, and then if something changes or something fundamentally is different about the racetrack or the conditions, that maybe Max Verstappen could win one as well. But everybody else, it's impossible because we've seen it. We've seen all of the different races where there's multiple safety cars and it's raining and there's a volcano nearby, and for some reason red cars can't win on this track. It doesn't matter. There are only really 4.5 drivers who can win a race. So under any other circumstances, let's say it wasn't as a straightforward track as Sochi is, as you said, difficult to overtake. Let's say this has happened at Spa, where the race is a bit longer, the track's a bit longer. This might have had a very different effect on the grid and on the positions of all the cars, because it's not as easy maybe to get by. The back markers or the gap wouldn't have been as big between the leading cars and the rest of the pack. But it just seems like right now that you can kind of throw anything at a race and you're still not going to get the kind of topsy-turvy, like, oh, look, Antonio Giovinazzi's could win this one. We had that last weekend and it still just shook out. It's like, no, that's nothing. That's not going to work. He's still going to finish maybe in the points. Like, he's not going to be able to cruise to victory here, or pull off I'll hang on to my tires and make sure I keep a Ferrari or a Mercedes behind me. It's just impossible these days because they just clear them so quickly. It's not quite the same thing. So yeah, I think you're right. Maybe we shouldn't be like sanding down the edges off this sport and painting over the cracks, because all things being equal, this is exactly why people love the sport. It's the weird weekends where you're like, oh, you know what happened? Someone crashed on the first lap. 6 guys came in and took the hard tires and managed to race to the end. I think back to the Ricardo Bottas Hungary fight. They both took really weird strategies that paid off. But when was the last time we actually saw one of these interesting strategies actually pay off on a weekend for a podium or a race win? It just doesn't seem to happen. It's, if anything, the weird sharp edges of this sport only pay dividends for the best 4 cars on the grid, and they don't need those kinds of advantages. What they need is some stuff that could kind of limit their abilities.
Yeah, it's a bit of a distraction. And saying we should fix these little things, I mean, it seems like almost every week there's some little thing like, oh, we should fix this little thing. It's like, we got to fix the fundamentals, and then all these little things, we won't even care about them anymore because it'll be so great that we just don't even notice. We should talk about Albon, who fought his way from a pit lane start up into P5. Surely a driver of the day performance. Forget Vettel, who didn't even finish the damn race and just makes an offhand quip about V12s. Well, he said bring back V12s, and all the fans are like, yes, Vettel, yes, he's the best.
We're the worst. Fans are the worst.
Albon did it. And I saw other people say that Carlos Sainz got he was the best performer for the race. I was like, Carlos Sainz, who finished 6th. And started, 6th or 7th. Like, I mean, Albon, pit lane to 5th. What are you talking about? Of course he's the driver of the day.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if people forget that he's so new to that Red Bull team as well. Like, he's been he probably wasn't expecting to be in the Red Bull this year. Of course he wasn't. He was probably waiting for it. He was like, if I stay in this Toro Rosso for 2-3 more years, then maybe I'll get a crack at Red Bull when Verstappen goes off to Mercedes. Yeah.
And then maybe I can be dropped.
Yeah, if I can somehow manage to survive 2 or 3 years in a Toro Rosso, maybe I'll get a shot at Red Bull.
I hope that I too can be dropped by Red Bull.
But yeah, Alexander Albon, it didn't seem like he had a great race. Every time they sort of cut to him, he was struggling around. But really, those struggles were him fighting his way through the field and putting together a good strategy with his team. Look, you could argue that that's where he should have finished because he's got the third best car or the third best package in Formula One right now with Sebastian Vettel having an MG UK failure. He should always finish fifth, but it's not an easy thing to do. As we've said, Sochi's not the easiest place to overtake. And there was lots of stuff to get through in that midfield. There were cars going in, 3 cars into corners and all that kind of stuff. So it was a great race from Albon, and I hope he just continues to tick along. Hey, it suits Red Bull, who are seemingly falling further behind. There was a point when it looked like Red Bull could really be like getting in and amongst the Ferraris and Mercedes, but right now it does just seem like maybe there isn't much for Max Verstappen and his friend Alexander Albon. So we've got to watch out for these kinds of performances to get a read on where Albon's going in his career. So I was happy to see it. He seems like a lovely guy.
Mm-hmm. No, he's a great guy, and definitely right up there in the new fresh faces that are also just. I feel glad when they succeed. I wanted to touch briefly on Kevin Magnussen, who got a penalty from the stewards for cutting across a corner, and it was a chicane, and he was meant to drive around the little polystyrene thingies, and he didn't, and he got a penalty. And then, the controversy has been Steiner, who got on the radio after the race or during the race and said, "Yeah, idiot, stupid, fucking idiot, dumb ass stewards giving you a dumb penalty. It's fucking stupid," something like that. And now the FIA are looking at that and going, "Wow, that's quite harsh what you said there, and maybe we don't really like it that much, and who knows, there might be some disciplinary action taken," which is like, oh boy. What do you think about this? Because obviously Gunther Steiner is one of the sort of new characters, very charismatic, very magnetic. I've described him as magnetic when we described our Drive to Survive recap. I thought he was, the revelation of the series. And Sky were cutting to him throughout the race many times, and he was quipping with them, firing off quips, shooting from the hip. Do we want to see more of this, or did he go too far?
It's one of those funny things where, like, team principals are another. They're like, if you have the 2 drivers and then a team principal is the next. Like the tier 2 of F1 sporting celebrities, really, I suppose. And I don't think the everyday fan would necessarily be able to name every team principal. I know there are that's
maybe one
totally fair enough, and that's exactly where Formula One sits right now. And nor should you have to be able to name all of the team principals. I think that's a stupid idea. I don't know why I brought it up.
How many legitimately do you reckon an average fan, definitely not us, but an average fan could name a single one?
A single one? I think we're lucky because, Christian Horner and Toto Wolff, I think people know.
Oh, Toto Wolff,
because they've got easy like Toto Wolff is a name you can know, and you see him all the time because he's not on the pit wall. He always has his camera. They have that camera in the Mercedes garage, so it's easy to get on screen. Yeah, you're right. And they kind of have, it's almost like a little media setup around Toto Wolff. Like there's him, and it used to be Niki Lauda, and now it's often the CEO of Mercedes Racing or whoever. Someone's always sitting next to Toto Wolff, and he's there looking massive in his white shirt that's half a size too small. It's undone down to his belly button. And his big Bose headphones on. So he's recognizable. I don't know how much of the team he's actually running. It's a bit like Zach Brown at McLaren. He's the McLaren CEO, and he's always at the races. But I often forget that he's not the F1 team principal at McLaren. He's just the guy who runs the whole company, and it's Thingy Steisel or whoever his name is. Who I didn't even really register that because that's not how the sport kind of thinks of its characters. So no, I reckon everybody may be able to name 2 or 3, maybe Claire Williams as well. Maybe not this year as much because they just aren't in the news that much.
They've been anonymous this year, yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's reasonably. That's about as... I actually couldn't tell you if I could name every single team principal right now. I don't think I could name the Alfa Romeo team principal. I don't think I could name the Racing Point team principal. Just off the top of your head, it's difficult.
Yeah, no,
so
no, good.
There's this kind of secondary thing, whereas like Gunther Steiner is this kind of guy who has a big personality, and I think that's good for the sport.
Come on, you're dancing all around it. Should he be like booted from the paddock next time he shows up?
No, I think that's stupid. I think the sport needs this kind of stuff. I hate the idea of Formula One having a party line that everybody's got to stick to. Like, it's too much sport. That's happened in too many sports these days, that everything, it's actually all for the sport. Like, it's all for the like the Australian Football League, or it's all for the league, or it's all for the whatever. Like, we're all in this together. We're one product. It's like, no, you're not. Like, you're all vying for wins and media attention, everything like that. Do whatever you can to get whatever wins you can. As long as you keep the sport safe, I think that there needs to be more of this infighting. And I think it's actually something that your opinions have generally kind of changed my thinking on this kind of stuff, which is you want disharmony. That's actually what you want as a fan. You want drivers being stolen by other teams, and you want, like a little bit of shithousery of like teams coming out pretending that they're going to do pit stops when they're not. Like, don't stick to the rules so sweetly that everything just clicks into place, because what happens then is you end up with Mercedes and Ferrari dominating every single race and nobody else having a shot. You want teams pushing the limits, and yeah, you can look back and say that the Red Bulls, when Sebastian Vettel was winning every single race, they were cheating because their rear diffuser and their special exhaust and all that kind of bullshit. Yeah, that happens. But the good thing about Formula One is it changes every few years, and teams find little advantages, and that they change the formula and all that kind of stuff. That's what keeps this sport really, really good. What we actually want is, as you said before, we want the sharp edges, so that week to week, race to race, there is a little bit of upset. The narrative gets upset a little bit, so that there is always some little thing in the race to point out and go like, look, that guy started in the pit lane and he came fifth. How fucking awesome is that? And fought really hard. As opposed to who reserved their tyres and the rest of their car and kept everything nice and cool so that they could get to the end without any fuss. Like, that's the boring F1 we don't want.
I think for me the problem is that it's not like Magnussen was on for a podium or something, and then the penalty dropped him off the podium. Like, it was like, I think he was in 8th and he finished 9th. Like, it just wasn't that big a deal. I don't know, Haas had a shit weekend and Grosjean retired and whatever, all the rest of it. But I mean, I don't know. I feel like they maybe should tell him, Gunther, we love you. You're a treasure. We adore you, but please don't, doubt the stewards who are, like, every sport has that kind of, like, the umpire or the goalie, the umpire or the referee is sacrosanct. You do not, touch them. You don't abuse them. They are beyond reproach. Maybe just, I think that the sensible approach would be to say to him, your reaction was not appropriate. I'm not saying when it is appropriate, but I know this was inappropriate. That's all you need to say. And then just leave it at that. But we'll see.
I think as long as you're referring to, I think it's a bit like saying, like, the man is out to get me. Like, we're fighting the man. Like, as long as you're saying it's, the good thing about Formula One is that the stewards are, until very recently, we didn't ever see them. Like, we never saw, like, now they show us, like, there'll be a camera shot of, like, the 5 stewards in the back room with their laptops and stuff. You're like, none of us need to see any of that. Like, they were better as as the masked people governing the sport, because I never really like to think of the stewards as using their human failings and human perception to make a decision on stuff. The rules are relatively cut and dry, I would say, especially with, like, driving around a bollard. Like, hey, you went off the track, you should drive around the bollard. We all agreed that was the way we were going to do this to make sure you don't get an advantage. And, there's the rule. So deal with it. And the interpretation of those things on the weekend of certain people saying it should be the idea that the stewards amongst themselves and those, characters may then make a decision, and some of those characters might be flawed. You're right. That doesn't need to be kind of pointed out directly. But I think as long as you're commenting on that idea as like a whole, like the umpiring was bad or the stewardship was bad, or I didn't agree with it, you're not calling out individuals. So I think you can be quite rightly be annoyed at the way a decision went, but you're not calling into question necessarily how the sport is run, which is maybe where you should draw the line.
Maybe. Well, I think we've definitely stepped outside the boundaries of what happened during the race, on the track at least. We should maybe keep this show rolling, and let's move into the fantasy focus. I'm waiting for someone to remix me saying that maybe this week isn't the best week, but someone can get to work on that. There's plenty of other times I've said it. Unbelievably, I forgot to put in some predictions, and no bonus points for me, no podium points for me, and I fell down 6 spots. So all that good work I did recently, completely undone, and you gave me giving me a sporting chance, keeping me in the game by falling 2 spots yourself. Very gracious.
I tried to change my team, and then I looked at it just before I was about to save, and I was like, wait a second, I dismantled my team, changed 6 things, and then changed a bunch more, and then I was like, this looks right. And then I looked at it again, I was like, maybe this was the team I had before. Actually, did I put everybody back? Because of the way it's run, there's only a few options you can do.
Because you kind of find yourself I know what I'll do. I'll get rid of this driver. He's not performing very well. Now I've got $3 million budget to spend. Who am I going to get? Oh, for that money, he is the best driver I can get.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not like there's 400 more choices. Yeah, when I played fantasy and other games, other sports, I'm like, all right, I'll get rid of this guy and then replace him with similar guy who is at maybe slightly different team or at the same price. Similar guy, but more chance of doing something different because it's a different guy. But here there's only 20 people. So you're kind of like, well, if it's not Grosjean, it's Magnussen. And am I actually changing anything here?
Yeah, they all suck. People who did not suck, though, the top 3 teams this week from this round were Skiteria Pants, which I'm sure is a diarrhea reference. I'm not sure whether I'm going to do well, which is a solid Weber pun, but probably we could probably trim a few words from that name, I reckon. And Baggins is the better dog, which I wholeheartedly endorse. They were the top 3 teams from this round. Obviously, every one of them doing a whole lot better than you and me, Zach.
Yeah, I mean, that's how it's going to go. It's an unpredictable season. Everybody knows it's going to be a Ferrari and Mercedes, but it's how you pick those other teams, those other drivers. That's the key.
Those guys are the Ferrari and Mercedes of our league, and you and I are the Haas and Williams of the league. Let's get back into some fertile ground where we quiz each other, which means there's definitely going to be at least one of us as a winner in this week's Superquiz.
We will accept a couple of questions. Should one only win one? Would one want to have won that one in round 1?
Can you repeat the question?
I think that made sense. Made sense in my head when I said it. Zach, I believe it's your turn to prepare a Superquiz for me and everyone.
Yeah, man. Just 1 week, though, when you say, I believe it's your turn, I'm going to be like, no, I haven't got anything. And just throw you under the quiz bus. Well,
of course I prepared a quiz. The F in F1 stands for what?
What?
What number is in the name F1?
That's harken back to the early days of our quizzes. No, I mean, I wanted to cover a topic that I feel like I've talked a little bit about, but it comes up quite a lot if you follow Formula One on Reddit or multiple different Formula One areas on Reddit. This one is gaining traction. It is the Formula 1.5 quiz. Rod, I want you to tell me, can you define what the Formula 1.5 is? I know this is a broad, open-ended question, but I'm going to give you points depending on how well you do. So tell me, or define for me, what is Formula 1.5?
My understanding, my working knowledge of what Formula 1.5 is, it's very, very similar to Formula 1. It's Formula 1 adjacent. In fact, it's inclusive of it. But what you do is you knock out the top 3 teams. So you knock out Ferrari, knock out Mercedes, knock out Red Bull, and then you look at who's left, and you imagine that the top runners of the remainders, you imagine that they won. They might have finished 6th, but let's say knock out the top 6 teams, top 6 drivers, and then boom, all of a sudden, Carlos Sainz is winning. Am I pretty right?
You are spot on. That is the broad notion of the idea of Formula 1.5. Basically, after much chat amongst the people in this 1.5 community, they basically decided that any team scoring a podium finishes at less than 25% of World Championship Grand Prix is considered eligible for the Formula 1.5 Championship. So basically, as long as you don't take a podium at more than a quarter of the races, you are eligible to win the Formula 1.5 championship. And by defining that, it meant that they could, this community could go back to every single world championship, every F1 world championship, and decide where everybody came. Because once you've got that rule, you can put it into an Excel spreadsheet and just plug in all the results, and away you go.
Yeah.
So, basically the main thrust of it right now is that because the top of the table in Formula One actually is not that close, but Formula 1.5 is incredibly close because basically if you take Williams out, everybody else is really fighting it out. So I've got 5 more questions based on this. So the first one is, Rod, who is winning the current Formula 1.5 Championship 2019, both constructors and drivers?
Yeah, I mean, I alluded earlier to Mr. Carlos Sainz. My strong punt would be that Carlos Sainz would be leading the Drivers' Championship, and probably have to go McLaren for leading the Constructors.
Yeah, it's really strong. Both McLaren and Carlos Sainz obviously doing very, very well, always there to pick up the pieces or come a strong 6th, 7th and 8th seemingly every race. So, I mean, what a turnaround.
Just for anyone who might still be catching up to what we're talking about, let's say Carlos Sainz finishes 4th behind some Ferraris and some Mercedes. He would then be promoted into 1st and get 25 points. So when we're talking about, well, they're leading the Constructors, you'd be like, well, why? He only gets 3 points or 2 points. No, if he is the first non-front runner, he gets the full 25. So they work it out like that, I believe.
Exactly. That's exactly right. You take the exact same Formula One scoring system. You just take out the people.
Yes, you just shuffle
basically
everybody
just
forward.
Shifting everybody up a little bit, which is quite good. Which is why it's so interesting, I think. So one of the close battles is currently between 2 drivers at Renault. Who is winning out of the Renault drivers? Daniel Ricciardo, Nico Hülkenberg.
Yes, those are the Renault drivers.
They're the ones. No points for guessing who they are.
Damn it, don't I get a 1.5 points? All right, well, I mean, this must be notable. You've made a question out of it. It must be something interesting. So I'm going to go Nico Hülkenberg.
Nico Hülkenberg is winning, yes. It is one of those things where he's winning by 1 point. He's put on... I actually thought he had a very good race this weekend. He was overtaking. He was pushing quite hard. He definitely... it seems like Daniel Ricciardo has not finished a lot of races this season. He's had one of those seasons.
For, mechanical
seemingly
reasons.
every weekend. Yeah, exactly.
And smashing into other car reasons. Or
driving over, drainage grates at his home Grand Prix,
we don't need to dwell on all the many, many, many reasons.
I just feel like he didn't get enough airtime this week, so we had to slot some Daniel Avocado right in there. But no, Nico Hülkenberg, the man without a drive for 2019, is currently beating his teammate at qualifying this weekend as well. So all round, not a bad weekend.
Everybody at Renault how well he's doing in Formula 1.5.
Well, speaking of Nicos, in the last 10 years, Rod, how many Formula 1.5 championships have been won by someone with the first name Nico? So starting from 2009 all the way up to 2018, the last 10 championships, F1.5 championships, how many have been won by someone whose first name is Nico?
What a ridiculous question. Okay, so obviously... the mind turns to Nico Rosberg.
You've done this quiz before, right? You've been in a super license quiz before. What do you mean ridiculous question?
There's no such thing as a stupid super quiz. That's a redundancy. The mind turns to Nico Rosberg, but then obviously a lot of his years were at Mercedes where they would, by definition, rule themselves out. So you might have to think that maybe he would be up there for maybe 1 or 2 in the early days of this range you've given me. The rest of them... Maybe Nico Hülkenberg's able to pip another 1 or 2 in there. So I'm saying in the last 10 years, maybe 3 were won by a Nico.
Look, your logic is not flawed. It's good logic, but you're not giving enough credence to the fact that Hülkenberg's had 2 pretty good seasons, apparently. So he's got 2. And Nico Rosberg has 3. Those early days, kind of pre-Mercedes days, he was all right. So, yeah, it's only... He was around Formula 1 for years and years and years. So, 5, so half of the last 10 Formula 1.5 championships have been won by a Nico. Congratulations to Nicos. And before then, Nick Heidfeld won a few as well, so...
I guess Heidfeld qualifies from the Force India days when they were, fourth best in the constructors or whatever, and the Nico Rosberg days when he was teammates with Michael Schumacher in his twilight years, and maybe not at his peak, but Nico had his number a couple of times. You're right. Wow.
Yeah. So, unsurprisingly, though, it's not always just been the best teams. Well, what currently the best teams in Formula One. Some of those teams used to qualify for Formula 1.5, and one of these teams had a surprisingly poor 2014 and ended up winning the Formula 1.5 Constructors' Championship. Can you tell me which team that was, 2014?
So you're saying this is a team that won in 2014, but now would not be eligible for this formula. Is that correct?
I mean, that's one way to interpret the question, yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to rearrange the facts you've given me into a way that my brain will work with. 2014. So, trying to think. It would have to. Does it have to be them? I really want to get this one right, but my brain is on reserve power, like the gears are grinding and stuff.
You're saying your MGUK is gone, and you're just on
basically
whatever's left,
so,
V6.
There's three teams to pick from: Mercedes, Red Bull, or Ferrari. We can rule out Mercedes. Hamilton won the championship that year. The question, though, is who out of the remaining two didn't do well? I'm going to go Ferrari.
Yeah, it was Ferrari. It was the year before Sebastian Vettel moved there.
Some races that year for the Red Bull, so it must be Ferrari.
Exactly. It was Ferrari, an incredibly poor year, and we were all like, Sebastian Vettel is going to turn up, and he's going to turn that team around, and they're going to win races and championships. Little did they know that wasn't quite on the cards. Rod, you're doing all right. Last question. In our lifetimes, with a whopping 5, which ex-McLaren driver has won the most F1.5 World Championships? 5 of them in our lifetimes.
I'm older than you, though.
Yeah, but not that much older. I accounted for that in the question. Ex-McLaren driver.
Ex-McLaren driver. I'm going to go Mr. Button. Jenson Button.
It is Jenson Button. Well done. Jenson Button.
Boy.
There was, in fact... if you're interested in this 1.5 idea and culture and community, you should go on to the F1.5 Reddit, which is where all of this information's come from. And somebody's actually written like a magazine-style article about Jenson Button, the best driver of his generation, essentially, because he's won 5 Formula 1.5 championships. Basically overachieved at every team he was at, except, basically just been at teams that were right on the cusp of whatever was happening when he was there, except obviously when he was at Brawn. So really, he's had a career of almost. And I think it's a great way to interpret Formula One. If you can look at the F1.5 winners and constructors, you can go look, they're all the people that were either just in the wrong spot at the wrong time or made the best out of a poor car or a bad situation. And I could say that maybe that's why Carlos Sainz went to McLaren, and maybe why Daniel Ricciardo went to Renault. This idea that maybe come formula change in 2021, and as we learnt this week, McLaren's going to have Mercedes engines again as of 2021. That's actually where you want to be, a team that is on the up and up, as opposed to coming second every weekend to the team that's actually dominating. So Jenson Button, thankfully he got his world championship in and amongst all of the almosts. And that's the end of the Formula 1.5 quiz.
Thanks, man. That was really good. Between F1 and between Formula 1.5, you combine the two, Jenson Button's got 6 championships. That's pretty good.
Yeah. I think that's really good.
On the back of last week's quiz about Robert Kubica, I wonder if he pipped in for one. I don't know if there's an easy list. Can you bring up an easy list and just quickly scan it? But interesting to see if Kubica scored one. In the meanwhile, I'll get us into the final thoughts segment where we think of things that we have already thought previously, and then we basically bring them to the table, drop them in the old potty, and then erase them from our brains. It's kind of like cleansing. It's kind of like a rebirth into a world beyond thought. Man, that's deep.
That's real deep.
If you found that
a world beyond,
if you found that fact, you could.
Doesn't
drop
look
it
like
here.
Robert Kubica has done it yet. No, it doesn't look like it. That year in 2014, though, Fernando Alonso was the Formula 1.5 winner. So just going through, looking at world champions who are also F1.5 champions, so Formula 1 and 1.5 champions. You've got Nico Rosberg, obviously, Fernando Alonso. It's probably going to happen one day for Valtteri Bottas. He was the 2015 winner, so I'm sure he'll win one at Mercedes at some point or another. Some Schumachers, but the Ralph kind. Martin Brundle, 1993.
Hey, there you go.
But there was also an Alan Jones, 1977. James Hunt, 1974. So there are some World Championship winners who also won 1.5. This isn't bad at all. But no Robert Kubica. No.
Oh, well. Better luck in future, Bob. Thanks for clarifying that. But we're into final thoughts. We're going to put the podcast home with final thoughts. Zach, have you had any thoughts that are of the final variety and you want to finalize them even further by formalizing them in this segment?
Well, so I was thinking about the Russian Grand Prix, and it was one of those things, it was a classic, like Bernie Ecclestone style contract. The idea that you would just find whoever was happy to pay a lot of money to get into Formula One would bring some big sponsors. And that was actually the idea I was going to go in and look at Russian Formula One sponsors this week for the quiz. And I started looking, and it was really just, there's nothing really there. Like, some of the teams this week had Russian sponsors on their cars, but there were banks and these kinds of things you already know a little bit about. As I said, it didn't seem like there was a huge amount of fanfare at the race this weekend. And I just don't really know who the Russian Grand Prix is for anymore. And look, it's not easy to defend every single race on the schedule, especially for next year. But it does seem like one of these non-event ones. Like, we leave Europe and we go off to Singapore, and then we come back to shove Russia into the calendar, and then we do some more flyaways. It just seems like a bit of a nothing on the calendar, and I wouldn't surprise me if come next year or the year after that perhaps our new friends, the new owners of Formula One, well, they're not that new anymore, but Liberty F1 maybe makes a decision that it's maybe not worth their while.
I don't know, man. They've got a bottom line that they want to drag forward, and adding more races or charging people who run races more money are the only two ways. So I don't know. We'll see. Obviously, they don't want to do anything to damage the brand further, though, so that's the problem. And I mean, you and I, we're rusted on F1 fans. We'll watch every race there is, but casual fan who's like, there's other things to do. There's Netflix series to watch. Like, my queue is ridiculous. I'm just going to skip the, the Disneyland Grand Prix that you've added. Just skip that one. It's literally a Mickey Mouse race.
Actually, I was looking at the calendar. I was looking at the races this week because I wanted to know when our next ones were. And if you look at go to the F1.com website, or if you're on the app and you look at upcoming events, it's got all the races, but there's also F1 Hollywood, which is on at the end of October, which is somewhere between the US and Mexico Grand Prix, I think. So they're putting it on the calendar like it's a race, but actually it's just an event. Yeah,
interesting.
It was. I was like, wait a second, is this next year's calendar or something? Have I missed something here? Is this a scoop? Have I scooped? But no, it was just a stupid event that they made it look like a race, like it was as important.
Yeah, I think that's like F1 London Live or whatever that one's called, but it's in Hollywood because such a tight connection between Hollywood and Austin. Yeah. Oh, you never know. They might get who would come out for Hollywood for an F1 Hollywood event. I guess you got like Matt LeBlanc might come out. Michael Douglas would come out. Yeah. Who else has been around races? Smith? Who's a Hollywood type? Of course, Will Smith. I'm thinking like Benedict Cumberbatch. Those kind of people. Who's the guy? The Mr. Magneto, Mr. X-Men guy. Who's that guy?
Which one? Fassbender or
Fassbender's the guy I'm thinking of.
McKellen.
Oh, well, him too.
Fassbender. Double Magneto.
Fassbender will be there.
Oof. Magneto 1 2.
Magneto. Look at those types.
Rowan Atkinson.
They'll just stand around and look pretty next to cars.
Yeah, exactly. I could get that.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, I guess, maybe I'll bring a final thought to the table. It's only just that, it was nice watching a race at 9 o'clock. Oh, boy. And I don't care what we have to do, but I need more races like that in my life and my sphere. Getting to sleep at 1:30 on a Monday morning is just too late. I just can't keep doing that. I
think there's more chance of you changing your own personal timetable than Formula One changing theirs. because I think this every year with the Melbourne Grand Prix. Like, why don't they just make it way earlier in the day so we could have like a Saturday night race in London? Like, that would be really nice if it was on at like 9 p.m. here. You could go out for dinner, come home, watch the first Grand Prix of the year. That would only be like 8 a.m. in Australia or something like that. That would be fine. You can have a breakfast race.
For me to suggest that the entire world should change just to suit my personal circumstances, but let's just say it wouldn't be the first time. I think that's nearly a show. I just wanted to forward announce another thing that I had an F1 dream the other day. Really good one. It was a two-parter. Basically 2 dreams for the price of one. So F1 dreams are back in the air. They're in the ether. They're sort of floating around. And that means this is the trigger. If you have been sitting on an F1 dream recently, if you've got a note in your phone that's labeled F1 dream, email to Rod and Zach next time they announce it. Here's the announcement. All you need to do is email it to superlicencepodcast@gmail.com. Mark it as F1 Dream. We will do an F1 Dream segment whenever we get a couple more coming in to make it worthwhile so it's less self-indulgent. And you'll learn all about this amazing F1 Dream that I had, which was a 2-parter. Yeah, I guess we haven't done this forever. We should promote, hey, we're on Twitter. We're at Superlicense. There's a Superlicense Facebook group, Superlicense Universe. Look for that and join. It's a private group, so, I mean, it's not that big a deal. It just means that you request to get in, and then we let you
private.
in. But the whole point of it is that it's, we don't just let in any old riffraff. You've got to ask. And if you're not going to ask, you won't get anything in life. That's about it, I think. You can check out their website. There's some interesting stuff there. And if you're a member of the Superlicense Club, there'll be some exclusive content coming out your way very soon.
Very soon. And if you're not, if you're not supporting the show in that way, feel free to jump on the store and buy some merch, man. Get some sweet. You like our album art, our podcast artwork. Why not get it on a t-shirt or a sticker?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, stickers are actually really, really good. All right, well, I think everyone's heard just about enough of me talking and coughing and grumbling my way through an F1 podcast. Zach, anything else to add before we wrap it up?
No, I'm looking forward to more races. It's going to be tight.
In general, or just for the rest of the season, like the normal ones?
Just for the rest of the season. No, okay. More races generally. I'm gonna go to the horse races. I'm gonna watch the greyhounds. I'm sure I think there's an athletics world champions on right now. I could put that on Eurosport or something. Yeah.
I've been listening to some F1 podcasts lately and noticing that there's Melbourne Spring Racing Carnival ads being, injected into the podcast dynamically, and I'm sure that it's just because they tag the podcast as racing. And they're like, racing, cars, horses, it's all racing.
Yeah.
I don't look that good in that fascinator, though.
I tell you what, though, if anybody wants to Photoshop that together and send it to me for my personal collection, I'll buy you over at the pub the next time I see you. Man, oh man, would that be good.
I'm going to keep my big mouth shut next time. All right, I'm calling it. This is it. Before I embarrass myself any further, until next time, my name's been Rod.
My name's been Zach.
And we'll see you after the next race, which is Japan?
Yeah.
Yes, Japan. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye.